Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another episode of African ChangeMakers, a show where we have out-of-the-box conversations with prominent leaders and personalities. Today, we are speaking to Inutu Zaloumis, a seasoned property consultant. She's the MD of Palm Golding, and she has been at the helm of that company since 2008, a company which she's also co-founder of. She has also worked for Two Rivers Investment, a company based in Nairobi, Kenya, and she worked there from 2018 to 2019 and has worked on a number of really big property investment projects, which she will speak about to the process of the show. Inutu Zaloumis, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this show.
It's an honor.
Sure. So today the topic we're discussing with you is wealth creation through real estate investment. And of course your CV speaks to that, obviously. But before we get there, just tell us a little bit about yourself in your own words.
So there are two sides to Inutu. There's Inutu the personal and then Inutu the business side. Yes. So I'll tell you a bit about both. On a personal level, I'm mom of 3 children, amazing kids. The oldest being 25 and the youngest being 19, going on 20. And they are my source of strength, joy, happiness. So I'm a mom. Right. I'm a mom. I love being a mom. I think it's one of the greatest jobs on earth, is to be a mom. Of course, a daughter and a sister. I have an elder brother and a younger sister. And as with any African family, cousins and all of that. So that's the personal side. I'm a private person. I love my home. Right. I love to be at home. I mean, in as much as my work requires me to be outdoors quite a bit, I love to be at home. I'm passionate about music. I love music, all types of genres of music I love. I can listen to Frank Sinatra and I can listen to Rihanna. So amazing. So there's variety. Yes, variety. School-wise, I went to Mkwazi, then went to Mpelembe, then went to, I was at Unza for a bit. I actually wanted to become a medical doctor. But my mother felt that, and I thank her for it, she felt that my constitution, as she would say, is not one to be a doctor because I'm very much an optimist, and she felt that environment would not really work well for me. She knows my personality, and I suppose at that time I thought about it. So I went to Copperbelt University where I studied business administration and absolutely loved it from day one in class. Wow. You know, so I did that. I graduated and worked in various places. And my property journey started over 20 years ago. My property journey started actually with my daughter. She's my second-born daughter. So there's Alan, Cameron, and Tyler. Those are my 3 kids. So started with Cameron. I was pregnant with Cameron, and that's where my property journey started. Somebody asked me to look after an extensive portfolio. And I thought, I'm a graduate, what's that? And I was actually in between deciding to stay at home and look after the kids as opposed to when my son was born. He was quite young, and he had a real working mom. It didn't last very long, poor Cameron.
So what is it that endeared you to say, okay, even though it's not something that you had thought about or dreamt about, but when the opportunity came, what is it that said, okay, let me take this up?
So it was really, I thought it would be a half-day job. I'm going to be blatantly honest with you. I thought, it sounds pretty easy. I could do half day, and then the rest of the day I could be at home. But it wasn't that at all. The gentleman did not disclose how big the portfolio was, and I think it was at a dinner. We were having dinner and talking about it, and he said, "What are you doing right now?" I was like, "Well, I'm pregnant," and I was pregnant at the time. But I've always been interested in property. It's not something that it just came to me then. I've always been interested in property. So now coming to the business side of things, because that's the personal Inutu I love to cook. That's what I love to do on Sunday. Sunday is my day to cook. I don't cook from Monday to Saturday because of work. I am a workaholic. I will admit it. I have to tell myself to switch off. Right. I'm a very early bird. I wake up at 4:30 every day.
It speaks to why you are successful in the in the particular field that you're working in.
Thank you.
So, I mean, not to cut you off, because we're talking about wealth creation,
Yes.
In property investment. So before we even unpack that whole idea, what is wealth? How would you define it within the context of property investment?
Well, you see, wealth, people perceive wealth differently. And I think to coin it, if you look at the definition of wealth, it's an abundance of something that you desire. So people see wealth very differently. Others see material wealth as being wealthy. Other people see education. The more education you are, the wealthier they feel. So when you look at it from a real estate perspective, wealth creation around real estate is really about having a diversified real estate portfolio. Some people might own 10 houses and not necessarily be wealthy because most of it is mortgaged. Right. Or they're not actually breaking even. And these are the things that you see happen. So for wealth, so what is wealth? So it's an abundance of something that you desire or something that you wish to possess. And the more you have, the more wealthier you are. Exactly. So that for me, that's what it is. Looping it back to real estate is, where do you want to be in the real estate market for you to consider yourself wealthy? There might be a lady who has houses in Matero and she considers herself wealthy, whereas somebody who has a property in Zambia, in Dubai, in South Africa, in England, in Mauritius, that's a different kind of wealth. But yeah, for me, that's what wealth is.
Okay. Do you think that it is possible to become wealthy or to acquire wealth without investment in real estate? Is it impossible?
The wealthiest people own real estate. If you look at, anybody who's extremely wealthy, and in terms of this, I talk about material wealth, somebody's net worth, they will always have a real estate portfolio. Right. And the reason for the creation of a real estate portfolio is that it is bricks and mortar solid in the ground that you can physically see. It is not something that is determined by the appetite of the market. When you look at shares and stocks and things like that. So that's why you find that real estate is one of the biggest things. I don't know if you know this, but McDonald's is one of the biggest real estate owners. They own their McDonald's sites. So they have a corporate real estate strategy where they own their sites. So imagine burgers, and you look at this company, you think it is worth so much, but actually its real estate portfolio is quite considerable. So you cannot build long-lasting wealth. I think that's something also that I need to talk about. It's not about, some people are wealthy in the short term. Okay, it's a flash in the pan, and you're wealthy for 5 years because you have so much money in the bank. But if it's not invested correctly, after 5 years, it's all gone. So you have to be able to create wealth. It is not the only way, but it should be one of the fundamental ways you create wealth, is by building a real estate portfolio.
I like what you said about the fact that, some people are able to create wealth, but it's not sustainable. Before you know it, everything goes under. And I always like to think that there's a difference between being rich and being wealthy. Yes. Being wealthy is something that is sustainable, it's long-term, and potentially goes, it's generational.
Yes.
So at an individual level, how do you decide that, real estate investment should form part of your investment portfolio? How do you make that decision?
So I think, in my opinion, what you have is that you've got to be able, first and foremost, to decide what type of portfolio you want. You have liquid assets and you've got immovable assets. And also, what percentage of your portfolio should be in liquid assets, what portfolio should be in immovable assets, meaning real estate. Right. So when you begin to decide what sort of portfolio you want, you must look at yourself and what you are most comfortable with. There are people who don't necessarily understand real estate to the level that they should. Right. People build, but are they really making money out of that particular real estate asset that they have? If you've invested in stocks and if you've invested in treasury bills, how much money are you making when you look at what you've invested and what you have at the end of it? So I think one of the things that I think, I believe that in Zambia we don't really do well is financial advisory.
Yes.
To get somebody to say, okay, look, where do you want to see yourself in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, and work with a financial advisor who would then be able to tell you objectively, invest so much in this and so much in that. Yeah. And investing in real estate, you can start when you start work.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with owning a house in Ngombe. Right. There's absolutely nothing wrong. It's real estate. It's going to be worth something. And you start at the bottom and then you go up, you build.
Right. And it's true, because a lot of the investment that we do at an individual level is based mostly because everybody's doing it.
Yes.
And everybody has said that this is the way to go. And we don't really think about it in the long term, like, okay, how am I actually going to get returns from this investment? Yes. So it's important, I suppose, to have a consultant, somebody who can advise and guide you along those lines. And then ultimately what ends up happening, I mean, from my experience, is that our investment is in residential property. And we never really think about investing in commercial property. It just seems too big a mountain to climb. What factors should a person really take into consideration when deciding, what kind of real estate to invest in, whether residential or commercial?
So, I mean, when you're deciding which sector you want to play in, don't limit yourself to a sector. That's the first thing. Okay. You can always look at properties long term. So you can start with residential, diversify into commercial, and then industrial, depending on where the property market is performing the best. So it's also about understanding where the opportunities lie. So when you are deciding how to diversify, let's say diversify your real estate portfolio, yes, there is a big drive towards residential because it's easier. It's not as expensive. But if you're looking at investing in commercial real estate, why not start small? There's nothing wrong with converting a residential house into offices. There are small little things that you can do where you can actually now decide that my residential house, because of the what's happening in the market in that particular area, let me change it to an office. And let me see what sort of rentals I can get. But before you do that, first do the math. With real estate is about mathematics. A lot of people tend to think that it's about feelings, it's about emotion. I'm very agnostic when it comes to, there's no emotion for me when it comes to real estate. Do the numbers make sense? And that's how you approach it. Nobody says, oh, I feel like buying T-bills. Oh, I love the way the T-bill, when I see it in the newspaper. But you take somebody to a house, they fall in love with the house. And you sit and say, now it's good, but at the same time it's bad, because at the point where you need to divest out of that property, there's so much emotion attached to it that it's a very difficult decision to make. Even if the market is shifting, but you find that people are stuck and they're like, no, but this is the house. I remember when we bought it, I planted the lawn and all of these things. We hear these things. And especially with us women folk, we're very, very attached to property. So looking at entry into commercial real estate, you can do that. And commercial real estate is not necessarily the huge, big office block. It is just one office, what we call commercial. For as long as it's not residential, it's commercial.
Right. The important thing is to venture and to start.
Yes.
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, really, really interesting conversation that we're having with Inutu Zaloumis on wealth creation through real estate investment. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back on the other side.
Meet Abby, your 24/7 digital personal banker. Let Abby make payments, buy airtime, and check your balance for you on WhatsApp. Another digital innovation that gets things done. That's Africanacity, that's APSA.
All right, welcome back to African ChangeMakers, a show powered by Absa Bank PLC. We continue our conversation with Inutu Zaloumis. So before the break, we were talking about, the most important thing is to start. So now when it comes to real estate investment, you have a lot of sentiment. People thinking, I don't have enough capital to start. I'm waiting to save up a certain amount of money before I can begin this venture. What can you say to somebody who may be grappling with the idea of starting to invest in real estate?
So like with anything, start small. You want to make mistakes. You want to make small mistakes. You don't want to make mistakes on a very big asset. So let's imagine somebody who has just started work. More than likely, they're either renting or they're living with their parents. At that point is when you can start. By actually, with real estate, you have to start with saving. We don't have a financial structure where you can get a mortgage for 30 years at 3%. That doesn't exist in this market right now because it's a young real estate market. We cannot compare ourselves to the likes of the United States or even just our neighbors in South Africa who have a very strong mortgage market. And a credit market, credit scores and all of those things. We're just starting. So we need to understand that first because people tend to have the perception that, oh no, how will I even start? So if you're looking at somebody who is probably 26, 27 years old and they're working and they're earning a salary, chances are most likely, and I don't mean to offend, but most likely every weekend they're out drinking. I mean, I think COVID has kind of like slowed things down a bit, or maybe people are drinking at home, wasting money doing something or other. But if you are focused and you decide, and I mean, I wish I knew this when I was 25, to be quite honest. So when you are at a younger age, you're able to make sacrifices that you can when you're single. As opposed to when you actually get married and have children, because your responsibilities shift. So at that age, you start at the bottom of the ladder. Enter small. There is nothing wrong with buying a house in Ngombe. Go and buy a house in Ngombe. Or, you can identify one of these high density areas that is slowly being gentrified. Look at what has happened to Kalingalinga over the last few years. I mean, it's changed. That road that used to have houses, now you've got Ali Kinkata Mall, and on the other side you've got the other ones. Now imagine if a young person had decided to buy one of those houses.
It would be a different story.
It would be a different story because when the gentrification happens, what we know is that developers need big blocks. So you're able to negotiate, you've got leverage and you've got power. So to start at the ladder, to start at that point, it's about seeing where the opportunity is. So people should not, so you save your money. If you're going to go out once a month, control yourself. The rest, it doesn't matter how much your friends put you under peer pressure. If you know your plan, you know that this is where I want to be in the next 5 years, those guys, they'll still be drinking after 5 years. You, my friend, will own a property. You'll be collecting rent. And the truth is, you have a house in the high density areas, there are no rental defaulters. There's no vacancy. The house will not be empty. Somebody's moving out, somebody's moving in, So to start there, then you begin to build. You begin to build because you understand what are the requirements. You even learn how to buy property because those are things that people don't know. How do I even go about buying it? The difference between an occupational license and a title deed, all those things. So you start there and then you begin. And imagine if you say, okay, house in Ngombe, 5 years time, I'm going to get myself a flat in Avondale. Okay, I'll live. And this by the time you're done with your 5 years, of course, your parents are probably expecting you to leave. You now go and say, okay, or you're renting somewhere. You've now decided to buy a flat in Avondale. You put that on rent. There is nothing wrong with owning a property and renting. In some instances, it actually makes financial sense. If you run the numbers. If you run the numbers, it's cheaper for you to rent. In certain instances, it's cheaper for you to rent, to live in a rented house and rent out your own property.
Correct.
And people don't see that. They want to live in the property that they own because of, as I said before, the emotional attachment.
Correct. And speaking of the emotional attachment, sometimes you invest and then the property is not giving you the returns or for whatever reason, it just doesn't make sense to continue with the property. What sort of factors do you consider when you want to offload the property back in the market? Emotional connection aside, but when you offload, what do you consider? Okay, let me offload this property.
So we consider a few things. First and foremost, understand what the property price is now in the market today. How much can you actually get for it? That's the first starting point. And get objective advice from a real estate agent or a valuation company. Don't let your friend who sold their house tell you, no, I sold my house for 2.5, and that now becomes your price in your head because you think your house is either equal to, if not better than your friend's house. These are the things that happen. Secondly, is that market area in demand? Then you'll do the mathematics. How much did you buy it for? If you borrowed, how much have you paid off? If you need to pay off the bank, what balance will you be left with? And then what will you do with that balance if you're left with a balance? If you're not left with anything, you might as well continue with the asset and build what you call equity in it.
Agreed. And also, because real estate is an investment ideally that should outlive you, and pass on to the next generation. So how do you ensure that smooth transition, that succession plan to the next generation?
So there are a few things. And I'll talk about, you mentioned that I was in Kenya. Yes, I headed Two Rivers Development Limited for about 16 months, but had to come back to Zambia because of having lost my general manager who was running my business in my absence. And I came back. But there was a property right in the CBD, the Central Business District of Nairobi. This building was bought. They had pictures of this building when Nairobi wasn't really built. It's impeccable. The lift works. Everything works in it. And I asked, this property development company, I said, this is an amazing building. I said, this is amazing. He says, first and foremost, we built it very well. Secondly, whenever anything broke, we fixed it. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize, is that in order for you to pass something on, it has to continue to hold its value. And for it to hold its value, you've got to look after it. It's like your own body. If you don't look after it, it's going to eventually give up on you. It's the same thing with real estate. So there's a rule of thumb that when you own a property, 1 month's rental should be reinvested into the property. So you do that. And then every 5 years, you should be looking at the major things. Your electricals, your plumbing, and then after about 10 years, you can look at structural issues as well. Also upgrading, because you want your property to be relevant. Correct. So what I found, my experience has been in the market, is that people build and then they just leave it. And then probably they've had a tenant for 10 years, whether it's a commercial property or residential property. The tenant leaves and they try to put it back on the market at the same price, and the market has shifted, completely shifted. So the rule of thumb is going back to the rule of thumb, one month. So when you're doing the mathematics of investing in real estate, remember that 1 month must be taken towards your repairs and maintenance, because people don't look at that. Then you also look at, if the property is empty, what are my costs, running costs when it's empty? Once you begin to look at property like that, you can leave it for generations to come. And property is long term. A lot of people expect to build today and reap tomorrow. Yes. It doesn't work like that. It's 20 years. It's 20 years, 15 years plus. If you're fortunate, even less than 15 years. In Zambia, you could recover. I remember when I just got into the property market, within 4 years, the return was 25%. Within 4 years, you have made your money back. Okay. But the market has changed now. It's matured, and now you're looking at about 15 years. Right.
Amazing. And you have been very successful in your career. Just trying to think about some of the projects that you have been involved in. I didn't want to mention them. I wanted you to say them. But these are some really, really big investment projects that you've been involved with. And before we just talk about what you attribute your success to, perhaps you could just share with our audience what you've been involved in.
So I've been very fortunate. I've been involved in almost every large large-scale development in the country, both private sector driven and parastatal driven. So Roma Park, I was part of the team in the beginning, working with them in terms of how best to, what should they do with this huge piece of land? What is the best? So what is the highest and best use for that particular piece of land? I mean, I look at Roma Park today and I drive and I'm so proud. I am so proud. You have no idea how proud I am. I looked and I said, I was part of this, you know. You see the rollout of the infrastructure. You see the beautiful homes that people have built. It raised the standard of real estate. And I think that's a very privileged position to be in when you can actually participate in raising the standard, in getting people to look at things differently. On average, I do a project every year, so I'm just trying to cherry pick. Then we've got Society Business Park. You know, Zambia National Building Society had Society House. They had the Chachacha, the arcade, that shopping arcade. I was part of the team there as well. So now what do we have? We've got Society Business Park. You've got the hotel, the Hilton Hotel. So part of the team. KKIA, the Kenneth Kaunda International New Airport, which is a lovely airport, and now the Ndola Airport as well. Yes. You know, so they're as well involved. So people ask me, so what do you do? You know, when you say you're a real estate consultant, what do you do on these projects? So basically, my job is to actually make people realize that the developer has got two things. The engineers and the architects and the contractor build. We look at what it will be after it's built. How best do we make it an environment where people will live, shop, play? Right. That's what we look at. And office as well, you know, where they're going to work, the kind of environment. What kind of tenants do we want to attract? So where do we position? What kind of rentals are going to be charged? Because at the end of the day, it's an investment that has to yield, has to have a certain yield. So we start going through that particular process. So I've done quite a bit, and in Kenya, Two Rivers Development, you know, which is Two Rivers is the largest mall in East Africa. Yes. It's 55,000 square meters, a mammoth. Yeah. When I got there, I stood there and I thought, what did I say yes to? But it was a fantastic experience because you get to see real estate being done at a larger scale level, and the participation with other government utility companies and how best, you know, we had solar, we had a 1 megawatt solar plant, we had power at 3 different levels, we had the City Lodge Hotel, and then what I was doing there, my job is to joint venture structuring. So land ownership versus the developer, and you joint venture structure. So that was it, and developing a team that would then ultimately run with it, and that's what I did.
Amazing journey. Very uncommon, especially in our country for a woman. So really, I think that you have contributed immensely to changing the game. Thank you so much for changing the narrative all of us. And I know you said, when you talked about your success, you said a little bit to luck, etc. But I think it's a lot more than that. Because if it was that easy, everybody would be doing it. So what do you attribute your success to?
First and foremost, God. You know, you get to discover your gift at a point in your life, and if you don't use it, you waste it. So I think my relationship with God is what has really helped me in my journey. First and foremost, discipline. I'm very disciplined. I'm focused. I'm, like I said before, I'm a workaholic. Now, I'm not embarrassed to say it anymore. I used to, but you know what? Let's call it what it is. I love my job. I love my job. And people would think, people always say, you work for Pam Golding. And I say, yes. And then they'll be like, who owns it? So I was like, I'm one of the large shareholders. I think now we're just 2. So I said, oh, you mean you own? Yes, but you work. I was like, yeah, I work for the business. That's what an owner does. A business owner, you work for your business because it's something that you've been given, and the servanthood mentality, I think, is what has actually helped me in that I don't take it for granted. You know, not taking it for granted. Secondly, the power of networks. I think in order for anybody to be successful, you've got to have a network, and use is not the right word, but leverage off that network. I'm a continuous learner. I'm always learning. So I recently completed a certificate in mechanics of real estate finance. with Middlesex University, just to be able to hone my skills. Now I'm looking at another course that I'm going to do. So you're constantly improving yourself because the market is so dynamic, you have to be relevant. And in fact, one of the keys to I believe that has made me successful is to always understand that I have to be relevant today. If I get caught up in the success, you'll be irrelevant tomorrow. Also, I've got a very good support system. I'm fortunate. I am fortunate. My kids are older, so they're at, my son is working in Vancouver. He's independent. My daughter's in 3rd year of university. My last born is going into her 1st year of university. So I am fortunate enough that I'm now at a stage in my life where I have the room. But then again, I started when they were small, and I had to literally create a structure within the home that we're a very structured home. Actually, we had a very, very structured home. The kids would eat dinner, and after dinner, clean up the table and lay the table for breakfast, so that in the morning we don't waste time. Small things like that.
It sounds almost military.
Yes, it is. You have to be, and to be honest, you've got to be like that. You've got to be very disciplined, and you've got to be organized. You've got to be orderly. Taking time out to relax as well. The balance of life is very important. And that I have to deliberately tell myself no. So, so I think that, but most importantly is my team, who you surround yourself with. I'm very, very big on getting people within the organization to learn more, to upskill themselves. I believe that in mentorship as much as possible. So I've been very fortunate to work with a very dynamic team, a loyal team, a passionate team as well. They're very passionate about real estate. So starting from a team of 8, we're now 24. And, we look and we're a family, 24 of us.
Yeah, it's clear that you are very passionate about what you do. It's fantastic really to watch you speak about numbers and as if they're alive, and clearly they are. So just finally, before we go, Inutu, I know there are a couple of people who may be watching and thinking, sort of amazing journey. I want to somehow navigate my life and somehow do something even half as close to what you've achieved. So that's your camera. Please just speak to our audience and tell them, this is how you can do it.
So I'm assuming I can talk to you from a business perspective. To be able to venture out into business, whatever business you decide to do, whether it's real estate or whether it's hair and makeup, it's about your gifting and your passion. And the doors will always open when you are consistent, when you are dedicated. You must be able to honor your word. If you are going to do it on that day, do it on that day. And if you can't, tell the people why. And you will also be able to understand the power of partnerships. It's very important that when you are starting a business, you do not have to start the journey on your own. You can partner with like-minded people who also have the same goals. They don't have to be your friends. I learned one very important lesson is that in business, your business partners don't have to be your friends. In fact, it's better they're not your friends, because then you have a degree of responsibility towards that particular business. Understand that it takes time. It's not something that will happen overnight, but always remember that there is, the proverbial pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, in that you must continue striving to be better, to be better, to be relevant, to be the best in what you do, at whatever it is. Be the best. Be the best. Always say, how can I be better than me? Don't look at the next person and compare your life to that person. Compare your life to what it was yesterday and how you can improve it tomorrow.
Wow. Thank you so much for being a part of today's show and for all the amazing insights you've shared with us. So much to take away. But yeah, we look forward to interacting with you more and more within the Push Women Network.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much for inviting me.
You're welcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. We were talking to Inutu Zaloumis on wealth creation through property investment. See you next time on African ChangeMakers.